This is Bob Melvin of the Padres, and you're listening to Jim on Base.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base Show. We're here in San Francisco with the great Bob Melvin. And Bob, thanks for coming on. It's got to be kind of a homecoming for you, right? I know you're from the Bay Area.
Yeah, every time I come back here, whether it's, we were just in Oakland, I think, a week or so ago, and then back here, this is where I grew up. I went to games here, or I went to games, or actually Candlestick, and went to games in Oakland and spent a lot of time following both teams and all Bay Area sports. So yes, it's very special every time I get to come back.
And I know you're a Menlo Park guy, right? So like you said, you're a Giants fan then, or both? Were you a fan of Giants and A's? Or
depending on who had the better team at the time. I don't want to call it fair weather, but I followed both teams and probably went to more Giant games because I was on that side of the Bay. But the certain teams resonated with me more than others, and obviously the 70s A's teams with Captain Sal Bando was the team I probably, at a very young age, liked the most.
Well, it makes me think too, reflecting out on the wall now, we have the Hum Baby signed for Roger Craig. You got to play for him. So do you have any memories of him or anything stick with you to become a manager yourself?
A lot. So I've always said that Roger Craig forced me to watch the game like a manager. And back then, a lot of the signs that came from the dugout that you're seeing today weren't as extreme back then, but Roger was a guy that wanted to control the game, whether it was calling a pitch, whether it was throwovers, whether it was pitch outs, all those type of things. He wanted his catcher to be an extension of him. So I really credit him with probably the first guy that made me watch the game like a manager, and it's pretty profound.
Well, rest in peace, Roger Craig. And another guy that he's a friend of the show, the great Vida Blue. So I was wondering if you got to know him through the years, and if you maybe even were a fan of him early on.
Very much a fan of his early on. Was lucky enough to catch his 200th win in San Francisco too. So someone I got to know pretty well when I was playing with the Giants. He was great to me because he knew that I probably followed him a little bit earlier in his career with the A's. The importance to the Bay Area with both teams always kind of resonated with me. So Vida Blue was a good friend of mine, and have a very heavy heart with the hearing of his passing here recently.
And another friend of the show, we had Matt Williams on in the offseason, and I was curious about your guys' relationship. You played a season together, right? And then you also were the bench coach in 2001 on that great run with the Diamondbacks, and now he's your third base coach.
I do know Matt Williams, and we've had probably, I think maybe 5 or so teams together. It was the Giant teams in the early 80s. After that, next was the Diamondback team that won the World Series. Next was when I was managing the Diamondbacks. He was a part owner when Jeff Morad was there, so we were on those teams as well. Then he was my third base coach with the A's. He's my third base coach here. I don't know that I've spent more time with anybody probably on a baseball field, staff, player, as I have with Matt Williams, and one of the great baseball men of all time.
Well, it makes me wonder, you guys have the ring, so what do you do with it? Is it on lockdown, or where do you keep it?
I very rarely wear mine. I'm not a jewelry guy to begin with, but I know where it is. It's one of the few things I know where it is all the time. It's locked up, it's safe, and it's something I'll treasure forever. And, when you have that kind of a bond, it's almost like a fraternity, right? That the guys on that team always have that bond, that ring. And the group of guys that we had there, I still am in communication with a lot of them. And, whenever you see one of them, there's just that special bond knowing that we were world champions together.
Definitely a great memory. And, I'm curious about you too, like off the field. Your daughter, right? Is she into filmmaking, or she's into the arts a little bit? Yeah,
she's always been. She went to the Lee Strasberg in New York, moved to New York, and she went there. Went to the School of Television there. She's very active in the diabetes world. She's type 1 diabetic, and she's done some great stuff as far as in that world. And then right now she's a co-producer for a new show on Broadway called Here Lies Love, and it's done really well, and I'm really proud of her. She's very passionate about that. The arts always has been her whole life, and she's living full-time in New York now. Couldn't be more proud of my daughter, Alexi.
And it's always cool to have an in with Broadway, right?
Yeah, for sure. As a matter of fact, as soon as the season's over, I haven't seen the show yet. I've seen all the reviews and some of the videos that she sends me, but very soon after the season's over, that's my first stop, is to go to New York and take in the show.
And I'm curious, how long have you been married, and how'd you meet your wife?
It's been a long, long time. So, you know, in baseball, a long, long time ago when I was playing in Double-A, so 40 plus years, and you know, it's life of baseball. Both my daughters lived it as well, so it's a very unique life.
Well, final question here. You've had such a great career playing and managing and coaching. Just curious, what sticks with you? Do you think more about your debut or your call-up?
Wow. Okay. You know, there's certain days that resonate more with you. I think my first game that I played with the Tigers, Detroit Tigers, 1985 was a surreal experience. I was lucky enough to hit a couple doubles and catch a win with a team that had won the World Series before, the Kirk Gibsons and Lance Parishes and Alan Trammell's and Jack Morris's. I got to play with that team my first year, so that was a pretty cool experience. Always remember Game 7 of the World Series with the Yankees and the Diamondbacks. And then in 2012, the 2012 A's team that came from a long ways back, there was very little expectation of that team, and won the division on the last day. And watching the crowd in Oakland that day when we clinched on the last day of the season, that was pretty cool as well.
Bob, I know you're a busy guy. You got a game to get ready to manage. Thanks for giving me some time, and it was really nice to meet you.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.